When you're trying to come up with a good choke load combination for whatever purpose that you've got going on, the shot shells matter, the chokes matter, the guns matter, and if all that doesn't come together, then you might end up with a bad pattern, or you've got a great pattern that's just shooting over here. You've got to know all these different things, how they're all coming together to affect your pattern downrange, whether it's at 15 yards or 50, 60 yards past shooting ducks or whatever, turkeys at, extended ranges. Everything that you put together in that setup will have some effect on your pattern. Hopefully it's good, sometimes it's not. This is why I need to go do this. It's a pain, absolutely. It may start off being fun, but after 50 or 60 rounds and different shells and choke combinations, it's not fun anymore. But if you really do your homework, you'll have more success in the field because of it. We spend a lot of time shooting to make sure that our customers get a choke tube that's going to perform the way it's supposed to. And our customer service, nobody can touch us when it comes to that. We bend over backwards to make sure the customer gets a choke that's going to work for whatever situation. We've got a 60-day satisfaction guarantee. We want our customers to be happy, and I think it shows in the customer loyalty that we have.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of GDIY. I am sitting here in southern Georgia with Scott Trulock. Scott, thanks for having me down here. Thanks for entertaining me while we patterned my shotgun.
No problem, Nick. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. So I'm curious, how does somebody end up manufacturing shotgun choke tubes?
Well, that's all my daddy's doing. He started off as So he was fascinated with guns his entire life, always hunting, shooting, doing something growing up. And he was working full-time as a police officer over in Cairo, Georgia, which is a few miles up the road, and doing part-time gunsmithing as well. Had bought a little manual lathe and, tinkering around. And early 80s, he was approached by a fella out of Alabama named Ralph Walker that wanted him to make some shotgun chokes for him, and it just kind of snowballed from there. I don't remember how they knew each other, but they knew each other, and so Daddy made us chokes, and then got to thinking, I could do this, and he did. He come up with the True Choke system, which was the first choke system that was designed to be retrofitted into shotgun barrels that did not have choke tubes in them.
Okay.
There were choke tubes at that time. There were guns that came with chokes in them. Not many. Most of them were still fixed choke. And he just got to thinking about it and said, I can do this better, and then sell these kits so that other gunsmiths can do the same thing. And he started off making the True Choke system and selling the kits to go along with them, and it just kept growing from there.
So were those kits designed for the DIY person at home, or did you actually have to go to the gunsmith to get your chokes put in?
Anybody can do it, but it was really designed for gunsmiths. But if somebody, John from up the street wanted a choke install kit, he could certainly buy one.
Now, roundabout time frame, how long ago was
that?
This?
Was when he first started Trulock chokes in 1982.
Okay. So around the 80s, that's when the choke tubes and I guess people's ability or access to select different chokes, that's when it really started, was around that time frame to where he's
early 80s. Yeah, I mean, like I said, there were already guns that came with choke systems in them. The Invector choke system probably being one of the first ones that was widely available from Browning. But other than that, there weren't many. Remington may have had something out by then. But it was nothing like it is today, where you have to look for a fixed choke gun nowadays, because they're just, most of them come with interchangeable choke systems.
Yeah. Why do you think that is? Do you think that's just the buyer just kind of, they want the ability to be able to swap out chokes, so they demand it? What's your
and
thought
that's the
process
bottom line. It takes a gun that may be suitable for one particular thing because of whatever constriction the barrels happen to be, and you can use that same gun for just about anything you want to, simply by swapping choke tubes.
So let's just assume anybody listening to this podcast has no idea what even a shotgun choke is. So let's start there. Let's start with defining what an actual choke is, its purpose, and then we can kind of go into all of the different choices and selections out there.
So a shotgun choke, be it a screw-in interchangeable choke system or a fixed choke barrel, is simply a constriction from cylinder bore of the barrel, constricting it down to something tighter than cylinder bore of the barrel, and that controls how fast the shot spreads as it leaves the barrel. It's all going to spread no matter how tight your choke is. It's just going to do it at further distance. So like when we're shooting cylinder chokes, that's designed to open up really fast, versus on the other end of the spectrum, a turkey choke, which is designed to hold as tight a pattern as possible at a much further distance.
Mm-hmm. And so when we kind of go into this conversation, there's so many different variabilities, not within just the scope of the choke discussion, but everything that leads into the chokes, to where I think when you enter in this world and you're hunting with a bunch of people, they're missing for one reason or another. Very often you might hear somebody blame the choke, or you need to change the choke, or where it could really be an ammo ordeal. It could be a shotgun ordeal. It could be how you're mounting and your lack of consistency. There's a lot of elements here, but I think a lot of people, they automatically attribute the fallacy to the chokes very often, more often than not, I would say.
It could be. It's very rarely that it's the shooters. I'm guilty of it too. Well, this ammo ain't no good.
I'm a perfect shot.
It could be I'm just missing. So, yeah, but everything matters. When you're trying to come up with a good choke load combination for whatever purpose that you've got going on, the shot shells matter, the chokes matter, the guns matter. And if all that doesn't come together, then you might end up with a bad pattern.
Yeah.
Something that, or you've got a great pattern that's just shooting over here. I had a gun one time, and I bought it with the intention of pattern testing out here with it and turkey hunting with it. Well, that thing was shooting about 2 feet low at 25 yards. It was horrible, and there was no fix for that. It just, all right, this was a waste of money, and yeah. So you've got to know all these different things, how they're all coming together to affect your pattern downrange, whether it's at 15 yards or 50, 60 yards past shooting ducks or whatever. Turkeys at extended ranges. Everything that you put together in that setup will have some effect on your pattern. Hopefully, it's good. Sometimes it's not.
Yeah, but that's the importance, and we're going to get into the patterning and how to really just kind of funnel and filter down exactly what you're needing, because you just mentioned a number of different species. Somebody listening to this, they might wonder, well, why won't a cylinder choke just work across the span if it shoots out of my shotgun really well? Well, depending on the game you're chasing and what you're doing, the presentation and the distance is going to change. So it's like, we can go down the shotgun path, we can go down the ammo path all we want, but really, like, in my opinion, it starts with what are you actually out there to do? Because if I'm upland hunting, that's going to require a different situation and setup than if I'm turkey hunting or ducks. I mean, just from how that typically interacts, to where ducks and turkeys, ideally I'm decoying, I'm calling in, I want them to get closer, and in the uplands they're getting further away. So just that dynamic alone will dictate or determine what chokes and ammo and by extension all these other variables like line up. But it goes into, you have to decide what it is that you're actually out there doing. And so down here, you just mentioned all those animals. What's your preference? Like, what got you into it? You say it started with your dad, but where did you get hooked into this business?
So growing up, I worked at the shop when I was forced to. I really wanted no part of it. It just didn't appeal to me. So out of high school in the military for a few years, and then when I got out, I went to working down in Florida with a communications company. And at that point, I started working with him after hours. When I would get off work down there, I'd come up here and work a few hours just to make a little extra cash, um, and here I am. Ended up going full time and been here since about 2004 full time.
All right. So one way or another, you got worked into the family business,
Yep.
maybe begrudgingly at
Well,
first.
yeah. In my early years, like I said, didn't want to be there, but as a grown man, I enjoyed it. So something changed. Can't put a finger on it, but
Yeah.
at some point I decided, hey, this is what I want to do.
Once you started settling down a little bit, maybe.
Probably.
Yeah. So what was it that you didn't want to be stuck inside the warehouse for? Were you trying to chase the feathers out there? Were you just preoccupied with other things?
We hunt. Growing up, we hunted every chance we got. Used to have a bunch of quail around to hunt. Did a lot of dove hunting, a good bit of duck hunting. Turkeys, not so much growing up, because nobody in the family turkey hunted. It just, I didn't know anybody that turkey hunted back then.
They weren't as populated back then.
No, there weren't. They weren't. There were some, because we'd see them when we was deer hunting or whatever. But for whatever reason, it just never crossed our mind. Hey, we can go shoot those things. But but that has certainly changed. I'm a diehard turkey nut.
Yeah.
I love it. Don't shoot dove much anymore. Rarely shoot quail or ducks. But I'm in the turkey woods every chance I get come springtime.
So your primary focus is now turkey, but it doesn't sound like you're any stranger to wing shooting and the quail and the ducks, even though that may not be your first choice. Talk to me about what it was.
Not necessarily not my first choice. It's just the opportunities that were to do those sort of things when I was growing up. I don't have them as much anymore.
And that's exactly where I was headed, to where you're in a small town. I think I've heard you refer to it as a speed bump in
pretty much
southwestern Georgia. And I love the small towns, but we aren't that far. We're just a stone's throw away from pretty prestigious traditional quail grounds in southern Georgia.
Yep.
So it's I don't want to say alarming, because we kind of know what's going on in certain places, but it's just saddening when you think about like the heyday of Bob White Quail in the southeast and what it used to be to this region down here. And now you're saying that there's just not even enough birds to really warrant fooling with them or chasing them.
No, not wild birds anyways. Obviously you can go to plantations, just take your pick, because there's lots of them around here. But the quail population has absolutely fallen off a cliff around here, wild quail. There are some, but not many. Back when I was growing up, you could, and pretty much all my family farmed. So we had just run of the mill. We had places to go to shoot just about whatever we wanted to, and you could just pick your fence row and walk it, and you could bust a covey of quail. So they were here. They were abundant. I think farming practices have changed so much from back then. That's had an effect on them. Probably the biggest effect, really. I mean, you see fields laying over during the wintertime, and they'd grow up and be perfect for quail. But that's just, you don't see that a bunch anymore.
Yeah.
Their habitat has changed, and their population has declined because of it.
Yeah. You add in the clean farming, and then maybe not so much in this small town, but just the development overall in the region. It just, once that field becomes concrete, it's hard for a quail to survive on that.
Yeah. Wiggum is pretty much the same size as it was 40 years ago. There's more people in the county now, but I think the farming practices have contributed to the decline, because farmers, they're there to make money. They're not really concerned with how they're going to affect the Bob White Quail if they do this or do that.
Right.
Can't blame them, certainly. And there are still some around. We've got some that live around my house, a little small covey. I don't hunt them. I like listening to them and watching them, but certainly wouldn't go try to shoot any of them. There's just not many of them there.
Yeah, it's always hard to fault the farmer for just trying to make a living, but it is, I don't know, it is saddening or disappointing when you think about what once was down here with the bird populations and everything, but it is what it is. Surely growing up this, with the quail numbers that you did and the experiences and the opportunities, you had to have some dog in your life at some point or another.
Well, I had a couple. I had one that was actually pretty good. She was given to me from a plantation. I say she was pretty good. They got rid of her for a reason. Maybe a little bit old, but that dog liked to run. Um, I mean, she did. You had to hustle to keep up with her.
One of them runoff dogs.
And the other one, couple of them here and there that, I mean, they were yard dogs in all honesty. They just never had any training because I certainly didn't know how to train one. I got the one fairly decent dog that was already trained, so I had her for a couple of years. But when I say she liked to run, the last time I saw that dog, she was running chasing a quail. Single got up and she took off after it, and man, she didn't come back.
She stayed gone then.
So yeah, the odd lab here and there. But nothing, no super well trained dogs. I've never had one. It was just a great bird dog.
Just meat dogs, just going out having some fun.
That's it.
Hunting partner.
Yep.
Yeah, I love it. So you grow up in the heyday of quail in the southeast. You're chasing ducks. You're doing what all of us would do in your case in the south, and just we have a fixation with being outside and the outdoors and wildlife. And then fast forward, here you are. You're finally in the family business of Trulock chokes. What sets Trulock chokes apart from all of the other choke manufacturers out there?
Our customer service and what you see right here. We spend a lot of time shooting to make sure that our customers get a choke tube that's going to perform the way it's supposed to. And our customer service, which, nobody can touch us when it comes to that. If you're not happy, we're going to do everything within our power to make it right. Sometimes you can't make somebody happy, and that happens. But we bend over backwards to make sure the customer gets a choke that's going to work for whatever situation that they're doing. It doesn't matter. We've got a 60-day satisfaction guarantee, where if they go out and they shoot it for 59 days, they just wear that thing out, and they call us on day 60 and says, "Hey, I ain't happy with this thing." Well, we'll refund their money or swap it out for something else. I don't think you'll find many folks that are willing to do that with anything.
Right.
So we want our customers to be happy, and I think it shows in the customer loyalty that we have, because they know they're getting a good product, and we back it up with we're going to make you happy.
You mentioned if with the 60-day satisfaction guarantee, if they go out there and shoot it for 59 days and wear it out, what kind of durability can we expect from choke tubes? Because from an outsider, I would look at it and I would be like, all right, some typical cleaning, some maintenance. I would expect it to last a lifetime.
A well-made choke tube will. There's an exception to every rule, but a choke tube made out of high-quality steel to exacting tolerances is going to last you for as long as you take care of it, pretty much. And we do use very high-quality steel, and we hold precision tolerances on some very expensive machine tools to make these things on, so that you do get consistent, repeatable finishes and tolerances, so the choke fits, and it is what we say it is. If you're getting a Skeet 1 choke, then you can be guaranteed that choke's going to have 5,000 constriction in it, cylinder bore 0. I've seen chokes from other manufacturers, not necessarily aftermarket choke manufacturers, because in all honesty, most of the aftermarket choke manufacturers in this country make a pretty good choke tube. I think ours are the best, of course, but I'm
partial.
I'm biased. But I've seen some that maybe they're marked modified, and it may be it may have 30,000 constriction on it, which is a full choke, or it may be cylinder bore. Sometimes you just never know what you're getting, even though it says a thing on the side of the choke saying this is what I am. That doesn't mean that's what it is.
Yeah. Well, and we saw that today just patterning my shotguns to where going back to the variability of how everything from the individual shot, the individual shotgun, we took the individual, I guess the mechanics of the mount out of the equation by using a sled on top of a table. That at least alleviated any kind of discrepancies within my form. But in terms of the shell and the choke, we ran a lot of different loads through the different chokes, and we saw that even just the cylinder from the 20 gauge barrel was completely different than the cylinder choke on my 28 gauge barrel. And then it was even different on whether we use flush or extended choke. So like if somebody's listening to this and they think that a cylinder choke is all of the same thing because of what you just said, it says it on the side that it's a cylinder choke, you actually need to run some shells through that shotgun and see what it's presenting, because there were some surprises out here today that me and you both I don't think would have guessed at the results. And
that's that's the thing. Even ours, I can guarantee you that I'm just going to use a 730 bore 12 gauge as an example. So we base, let's say rim choke, base it on 730 cylinder bore. I can guarantee you that if you buy a skeet or a modified from us, you're going to get a 5 or a 20 thousandths constriction choke from 730. Now, your particular bore of your barrel may be 733, it may be 726, 725. So that's going to throw the actual constriction from the cylinder bore of your barrel. You may get a true 5,000 constriction, or you may get something more or less. So that's where patterning comes in. You just because you've got a skeet one choke doesn't necessarily mean that you can get a skeet one pattern out of it at 25 yards.
And 25-yard mark, especially in the uplands, that's probably, on average 20, 25, 30 yards, somewhere in there on ballpark, especially with like pointing dogs, you getting up closer to them. That should be around the range that we're shooting most often. We take some longer pokes, and some people definitely shoot closer if the bird gets up. But is 25 yards, is that typically the distance that you would advise most people to pattern their shotguns, at least with the type of chokes that uplanders more typically are going to use?
Probably, but anywhere from 15 to 30 yards, and that's going to cover cylinder bore through improved cylinder chokes. Now, obviously, if you're shooting further than that on a regular basis, you're going to want a tighter choke. But yeah, 25 yards is a good benchmark for what we call close range shooting, and not just upland, but that includes waterfowl shooting in timber as well. So close range is close range. It doesn't really matter what your game is. Typically, you're going to need a more open choke at close range, be it upland, waterfowl, whatever.
So when we talk about open chokes, this is something that we fooled around with a little bit today. Is I think that the average uplander most commonly hear about cylinder chokes or improved cylinder or your skeet 1, skeet 2. We fooled around a little bit today with the spreader choke. This is something that you don't carry stock. You're not going to find it on the website, but you guys do make it when it's requested. What's the difference between a spreader choke and a cylinder choke?
So the spreader was designed to open up more than cylinder bore of the barrel. We do some things on the inside to try and settle the shot down slightly, and then flare it out at the end so it can open up faster. And that's just the whole purpose behind it, is to try to get your shot string to open up faster than cylinder bore chokes typically will.
This type of choke really intrigued me, not so much for the hunting, because when you and I first discussed this, you made a good point about, how applicable is it going to be in an actual hunting environment, especially when you compare it to the cylinder, which we already have. But I think with certain uses and certain activities and games, such as these field trials that I participate in, especially when we're talking about timed field trials where time is of the essence, like you're really going against the clock and you're dealing with pin raised birds to where you're not dealing with a bird that is going to just wild flush 20 yards out and then be 35, 40 yards out in a blink of an eye. A lot of the times we're actually kicking these birds up. And that's what I told you, to where if I had a choke that in those environments allowed me to take a shot at the bird without blowing it up at 10, 15, 20 yards, that 5 to 10 yards, you do that over a few different birds, that can add up. That can be some serious time. And this is where I initially heard about the spreader choke. It was at a UFTA trial. A buddy was talking about it, and it was kind of interesting how nobody else around him had heard about this. And then when I was talking to you, I'm like, all right, like I'm really, it piqued my interest. And we set it up here and we shot it side by side compared to the cylinder. And there was a little bit of a difference. I'm not going to say it was drastically different, but there was more spread at 15 yards than the cylinder bore. The cylinder was still, both of them patterned pretty well, but the spreader seemed like it spread just slightly a bit more at 15 yards.
And if in that kind of situation, every little bit helps. Not a drastic difference, but as I'm sure you'll show those patterns. There was, if you got really right down to it and got real detailed and looking at those patterns, you could see maybe 5 inches of difference spread. The cylinder bore did not fill out the 20-inch circle that we drew around it, and the spreader did. It pretty well filled that up. So that's not a huge amount. But enough that it may matter. There's a difference there. If I had a smaller circle and could wrap up the core of that pattern, I could make that a much smaller pattern versus this one. It pretty well fills out the 20-inch. So at first glance, not a big difference, but there actually is. Spreader chokes, not a stock item for us. I do make them on occasion, on request. And it's just designed to open up a little faster than a cylinder bore choke. Obviously, this is a close range choke. This is done, both of these patterns shot at 15 yards. So it opens up a good bit faster than a cylinder bore choke would. So these is for really in your face shooting. Anyways, if you're interested in those, you won't find them on our website. Just give us a shout, and we can talk it over and see what you need. Especially if you got time
if you're dealing with a game such as UFTA, to where like the goal is to get out of that field as quick as possible, just shooting that bird 5 yards closer, that's less time for the bird to travel. That's less time for the dog to go get it and bring it back to you, and you're on to the next one. Again, I've been thinking about it. I can't really think of an actual hunting scenario other than maybe woodcock, because woodcock will generally let you get pretty close. But I'm curious. I'm going to do some more experimentation, because if anything today showed me was I need to experiment more. I need to actually set up some paper. I need to pattern this more with different shells and really contrast this, because I will be interested to see over time if there really is a net benefit to the spreader choke over the cylinder. Because based on our short demonstration here today, it's like there's a slight difference. I just don't know if it really is that big of a difference.
Well, the only thing you can do to prove or disprove that is to go shoot.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it. Bottom line. We shot very little out here thanks to the weather. Decided to rain on us, but I think if we'd have been able to shoot 10, 15, 20 times, a real solid pattern test, then you would have probably seen something starting to establish itself. Maybe it was for the plus for the spreader, or maybe not. And maybe the ammo. We shot one type of ammo through those chokes during that the spreader versus cylinder choke test, and maybe a different ammo would react differently, spread better, not as good, and that's you can sit out here and do this all day long.
You really could.
With the various there's so many options that you have to choose from. You could spend a lot of money and a lot of time trying to figure out things, and that's one of the things we try to do for our customers. We try to shoot. We can't shoot all the ammunition on the market. There's just too much.
Yeah.
There's just way too much. But we try to shoot the most popular, what we feel is the most popular ammo that's going to be used for each choke, whatever it's designed to do. We tested a variety of stuff to make sure our chokes are going to work as intended most of the time. Anybody that tells you that every choke they put out the door works every time, well, they're lying to you.
Yeah.
And we're no different. Sometimes we miss. Sometimes we can't get a gun to pattern for whatever purpose the customer's aiming at. But we certainly, it's not for lack of trying. I've sent I've sent customers 6 or 7 different chokes over the course of a month or two, trying to get their gun to pattern, and usually we can nail it, but sometimes you just can't. I don't know if that speaks to the gun or his setup or whatever. Like I had a guy that it ended up being his shotgun. I don't know how many different chokes the guy tested, trying to get a good turkey gun, but it just would not shoot, and ended up he had something screw with his barrel that was just throwing everything out of whack. So but he would not have known that if he hadn't a pattern tested.
And I mean, somebody listening to this might be like 6 or 7 different chokes to figure out that your gun isn't doing it right. But I guess when you start figuring out all the different factors and variables, swapping out a choke tube to figure out if that's the case is a heck of a lot easier than really breaking down a barrel and figuring out what's amiss on a barrel.
And a choke tube is easy to swap out. Figuring out what may be wrong with your barrel or shotgun, maybe it's something else, not your barrel. Most folks they don't have the equipment that are capable of
measuring that.
Seeing. In his case, in that particular case, where his barrel had been counterbored and threaded for the choke tube, it was not centered on his barrel, so it was off a little bit. So
Catawampus.
Everything was just getting. As soon as the shot charge hit the choke, it was just kind of throwing everything sideways.
So did you just get a new barrel? And
I mean, that's really all you can do. Yeah. Sometimes you can cut them off and put new choke, ream them and tap them for new chokes. Sometimes not, but
yeah, I guess if you have a 30-inch barrel and you don't mind going down to a 28-inch barrel, I guess that's not that big a deal.
Yep.
What is it there's so many variables. I already know the answers. You're going to say, well, it depends, or I don't know. But like gut feeling, if I was to just take 2 of the same shotguns and 2 of the same chokes and everything else is the same, say we're using a shotgun sled, where you take the form out, we're using the same ammo. What's your gut feeling? Like, why will it throw a different pattern on there?
Most of the time it won't. If that was the case, if that happened often enough, then aftermarket choke manufacturers would be out of business, because we couldn't keep up. We could not make enough chokes to cover every different little shotgun out there. Most of the time, identical guns will pattern the same. It's the exception that you get 2 that don't, which is why we're able to produce as many chokes as we do. If we had to dial a choke in for every barrel that was made in Remington 870, it's impossible. But most of the time, things work as intended. It's just like that 870 I had that shot so far off. That was just that was abnormal. But because I've had many 870s over the years, and they've all the other ones have shot, did what it was supposed to, but that one did not.
One thing I appreciate about you in conversation and other interviews I've listened to you on is like you're not one to cherry pick the brands on anything on the ammo or the shotgun, because you're just like, I've seen all of them be good, I've seen all of them be bad. There's really, so anybody listening to this that thinks that it's brand specific, you've witnessed that the same brand, it can be good here and then bad and then the next day in somebody else's hands.
Yep. Everybody makes great products, and everybody lets a bad one slip out sometimes. I don't care how expensive or cheap the gun is, or choke tubes or shot shells. Everybody's got good stuff, and occasionally everybody's got a bad whatever. Choke, shot shell, lot of shot shells, or gun. So but that's where what we just did comes into play. You don't know what your setup is doing until you put it on paper. Shooting at a pond or a beer can on a fence post does not cut it. No,
it's fun.
It is fun, and I've done it. It's lots of fun, but that's not going to give you any kind of hard data on how your setup is performing.
So let's talk about acquiring that data. Let's talk about putting it on paper and patterning it. Somebody listening to this, they're brand new to this. They've never patterned a shotgun. Heck, to be perfectly honest, I've shot at paper in the name of patterning it, but I haven't really given it a full effort, if that's fair to say. So today, this was the first time that I'm actually with any kind of resemblance of structure did a patterning board and started trying to deconstruct what all these chokes do with my shotgun and the loads that I typically hunt with. So for that person that's brand new that has no idea how to even go in their backyard and start patterning their shotgun, talk about all the elements and what somebody needs to consider when deciding to go do this.
If I'm setting up a new shotgun, and I want it to be specific to Upland, all right, I know I don't necessarily need to have a pattern board set up at 40 yards. You want to pattern your shotgun at the ranges that you will shoot on average. Okay, if you're using the same gun for turkey as you do quail, then you're going to need to set up. You're going to need to do two different pattern sessions. So set up your pattern board at the range that you expect to shoot on average, and then get you your choke tube that's ideal for that distance, and a handful of different shotgun shells if you can. If you start with brand X shotgun shell and it's patterning great, is exactly what you want, then you shoot. We shot some fairly short strings today because we time crunch and weather, but a minimum of 10 is a minimum of 5. 10 is better. 15 or 20 is even better than that. So the more you shoot, the better your data is going to be. And then you gather up all your patterns and you go to circling and counting holes, and then you come up with you find out how many. You can cut the shot shell open and count the pellets in a couple of them, or you can. A lot of shot shell manufacturers getting better about it, about putting their average shot count in that shot shell. A lot of times you can just, if it's not on the website, you can just call them and ask them. Now again, that's going to be an average. Every lot can be.
Yeah, nobody's in there counting out every single pellet in a 7.5, 8 shot.
And then you take that and you take what's supposed to be in the shot shell divided by your average pellet count, and that gives you your average percentage. And your whatever distance you're shooting at doesn't matter. You want a minimum of 70% of that total payload within your target, be it a 10-inch turkey target or a 30-inch wing shooting target. If you're shooting at ducks, then obviously you can stand a little bigger pattern than you can shooting at a Bob White Quail, and still get you, but you still won't. You don't want so many holes in your pattern that the bird won't get hit with multiple pellets. Is what you're after. If you've got all your shot concentrated in top right corner of your pattern, then you shoot ahead of the bird and he's crossing, and he ends up here where there's not very many shot, then there's an issue. That's not going to work for you. So you want an average. You're looking for good pellet distribution within that target, and a minimum of 70% pellet count.
And so typically we're talking about 70% of your payload within a 30-inch diameter circle.
For most wing shooting applications, yes. 30 inches is kind of, I don't know if it's official, but it's kind of the standard everybody goes by.
It's y'all's measuring stick. And then you also had a 20-inch circle, which, each their own. It's your prerogative to where if you're comfortable sending a 2-foot load at a flying bird as opposed to a 3-foot load, you can really pattern this down to the extreme if you really want to. But what I found interesting was, we did 2 different distances. We did a 15-yard distance there at the end doing the spreader choke just to see how open we can make it. But then we did the 25-yard mark, which in most upland hunting situations, at least rough grouse, I know William Hardin Foster wrote in his book, I want to say it was 25 yards that he measured would be like the average shot. So we just kind of kept it at that 25 yards. And the drastic difference that we got from choke to choke, from load to load, it's almost like you said, we did short patterns and strings through this. Normally we started off doing 5, but we saw real quick we weren't going to have the time that was necessary, because for future reference, if you invite me somewhere, it's going to rain. That's just the way it is. I bring the rain with me. But it was eye-opening in the fact that, the drastic difference, especially when we switched from the 20 gauge to the 28 gauge, just the wide difference in the cylinder patterns, like that really opened my eyes to where, it's different shot loads because you're using 28 and 20 gauge, but they were still the same shot size, at least. Both were 8s, and just the fixed bore cylinder on my 28 gauge barrel completely just spanned the entire width and length of that paper, to where the ones that actually had the choke on it, it was a nice good pattern within the circle. That was pretty eye-opening, that I'm like, I need to experiment a lot more with this.
Yep. And we only shot one kind of shell with that out of your 28. So, a different brand shell may give you different results.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody can explain why that happens, but it certainly can, and I've seen it a lot, where this load is not shooting very well, but then I swap brands to basically the same. When you're doing this, you don't want to go from, all right, this number 8 shot is not shooting well. Let me throw in these number 4s and see how it shoots. No, you want to stick to as close to what you started with, apples to apples, if you can. Just swap to a different brand shell. And a lot of times that will fix whatever issues you're having. And I don't know why that is. Something the way the shell's put together, how it interacts with your barrel, and the choke tube. But that's certainly pretty common.
I've been in the field with some guys that they'll take their choke wrench out in the field with them. They'll keep it in the vest almost, and they will swap chokes in the middle of a walk. Not a lot of people, but I've been with a few people that do that. I'm curious, in your opinion, if you go through the effort and the energy, and you pattern your shotgun and you figure out the loads and everything, is that really advisable to make like in the field decisions and switches like that in real time?
If you're you start off in the morning and all the birds are, you're shooting them at 15, 20 yards. Well, that afternoon, for whatever reason, you're shooting them at 30 yards. As long as you know what that choke is going to do that you're putting in there, I certainly wouldn't do it start off with this choke, knowing how it shoots, and then well, I don't like the way this is going. I'm going to do something different. I wouldn't do it without knowing what that difference is going to do to my pattern.
Knowing or not knowing what it's going to do to your pattern, there really is no, again, you're going to have to put it on paper. You're going to have to test it out. What are some of the other elements when it comes to selecting the choke that can potentially change that? You know, we have the difference in flush chokes versus extended chokes. Let's start there. Like what are the pros and cons to both of them, and your thought process as to your personal preference?
Well, I'll start with my personal preference because that biases everything else I'm fixing to say. I never shoot flush chokes unless I just can't get anything else at the time. Extended chokes, they're easy to swap in and out. You typically don't need a wrench to do so. They protect the muzzle of your gun. You know, you got leaned up against a truck and it falls over and it whacks into whatever. You know, if it hits the choke tube, well, you can replace the choke tube pretty quick. But if it whacks into your barrel, now you got a bent barrel. So there's that. You can easily identify what kind of chokes and any, you know, what constriction. At least with Trulock brand, we mark all of our chokes on the head if they're extended. And typically, and this it takes a lot of shooting to prove this out, but typically extended chokes will shoot a more evenly distributed pattern and slightly tighter as well. So there's that going for it.
Which we saw today, which we sent one load through
Right.
an extended choke just to compare, and that's the result that we saw.
And I would discount that. If you told me you did that, I'd say you haven't learned anything because we saw that, you know,
Right.
from shot to shot on a couple of these things. We had first shot was horrible, and the second shot was like, man, that was really good with the same load, same choke. But when I say more evenly distributed and slightly tighter, that can take 20, 30, 40 shells to
really see.
Yep.
Yeah.
I just prefer extended chokes for several reasons. Now, a lot of folks don't. And as we saw, you know, from shot to shot, you may not see much difference at all. Cylinder bore flush versus cylinder bore extended. But over time, you will see some difference.
Yeah. You told me that, you know, when we first talked about it, is your preference for extended chokes. And I couldn't help but laugh and snicker a little bit just because of the you know, looking down our nose as Uplanders at the side-by-sides, double gauge shotguns. It's like some people, it's almost sacrilege to put extended chokes on a good-looking side-by-side.
Yeah, I'm not one of those guys.
Functionality.
I could care less.
Well, so how many times when you're talking to people, again, back to your customer service, and you're talking to all these people that are wanting custom chokes, how much of it does looks come into play a part on this?
That's hard to say. You know, some folks are like me and they just, you know, they want something that works. Don't really care what it looks like. And some folks want, you know, they want the latest and greatest, shiniest thing they can get, you know.
They want 6-inch long extended chokes with portholes in it.
Yeah. So it's really, that's a tough call. I wouldn't even care to guess on that. Most of the time, customer calls and they've already got something in mind. If they already know exactly what they want, then hey, great, that's what I'm going to send you. But if they kind of got an idea what they want, but they're you know, what do you think about it? Then I'm going to tell them what I think they need to get the best result, regardless of what Scott likes. You know, if I'm going to give them what I think they need.
When somebody's trying to figure out what chokes they need, what are the aspects? I mean, obviously you have to decide, you know, cylinder, full, improved cylinder, all of the different selections, but what are some of the other factors that you would say that you really need to take a look at and see? Because, you hear a lot about, the portholes in some of these. Does that really do anything for it? Like, and when it comes to when you're guiding somebody on what matters or doesn't matter in this game, what matters?
What size load you're using, how far you're shooting, and what kind of pattern do you want. And that's all it boils down to. Everything else is immaterial. If I can give you a choke that's going to satisfy all three of those requirements for you, then you're good to go. So those are the three big things: shot size, what your game is, and how far are you shooting.
It just seems like it's one of those things that you hear about it from the moment you enter in the space, from hunter safety. It's like, oh, go pattern your shotgun. And you do hear every year when turkey season comes around, you do hear a lot about people patterning their turkey shotguns. But for some reason, I at least don't see or hear about the uplanders or the waterfowlers doing the same patterning. It seems strange to me that something that we've spent like 2 hours out here doing this morning, and it really opened up my eyes. You would think when it's that like obvious and on the nose that other people would have recognized this by
I
now.
think you're right. Turkey hunters
Do a better job at this.
I think so, because you're trying to shoot. I mean, obviously a turkey's a big bird, but you're trying to shoot him in the head,
Right.
So you got a very small target, and they're pretty tough. So you want to put as many pellets as you can on him to get him down. I can't explain why wing shooters are any different.
We just are.
It's just the way it is. As long as I can sling some shot out there, I'm good.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that, but we did. I think if folks will watch the video and see just how different things can be, then they'll see that this is why I need to go do this. It's a pain, absolutely. It may start off being fun, but after 50 or 60 rounds and different shells and choke combinations, it's not fun anymore. But if you really do your homework, you'll have more success in the field because of it.
When we're talking about a tight target, you just talked about turkeys, and it's a small target. I have a really close buddy that I grew up with. He was kind of the one that got me into duck hunting and everything, and it's really interesting talking to him. He's an advocate of full choke everything, whether he's duck hunting, quail hunting, grouse hunting. It does not matter. That man is putting a full choke in and going. And just through conversation and learning more about this, what I find interesting is that like you can choke it down so much that it actually blows out your pattern. A, why does it do that? But then B, like what are some other misconceptions such as that, to where logically or just common sense, somebody might come into this and be like, okay, full choke. So if I just full choke everything, then it's consistent across the board. That's his logic. But it actually has the opposite effect of what we really think it's doing.
It can. Tight chokes, turkey chokes, they're all typically very tight. But if you shove a lot of shot through a really tight hole, a lot of times, and I don't know exactly what's going on, because I've never seen what happens inside of a choke tube. All I can see is results on paper. It's just like you're just trying to put through too much through a small hole. So it, instead of coming out nice and smooth and,
Like
and tight,
pressurized.
I think it just kind of bounces off each other. That's my take on it. Don't really know what actually happens, but you see the same thing with large steel shot, and too much choke tube. A large shot of any kind and too much constriction will lead to blown patterns versus tight patterns or consistent uniform patterns. If you're not after a real tight pattern, you're just looking for a nice even wide pattern, but evenly distributed. But if you put too much constriction on that shot, then I think it just starts bouncing off each other. I don't know what else to say about it, because I've never seen what happens inside of a choke tube. I wish there was a way to do that. That'd be fascinating, but
I'm sure there's somebody out there that has some kind of crazy technology or something out there. So
yeah.
I'm curious, do you see that more with the harder shot stuff that, like you said, they bounce off each other? So when we're talking about steel or TSS, the tungsten, that's harder shot, so it should bounce. What about lead? If it's more malleable, would it have the same impact of blowing out a tight, like if it's choked down too much, it would still have the same thing?
You can over-constrict lead as well. I've seen that with buckshot with too much choke, and it just doesn't give good results. Too much constriction is a bad thing. So you have to take into account, all right, what am I trying to do? What's my shot size going to be? What distance am I shooting at? All those things matter into picking the correct choke tube to do whatever you're intending to do. But yeah, to answer your question, blown patterns are a real thing. We've done it. We've done it on purpose just to see how tight we could go before bad things started to happen. You see it a good bit. You probably see it more with waterfowl hunters using a large diameter steel shot, and turkey hunters using really tight chokes with really big payloads in them. Because I mean, there's the TSS nowadays. I mean, 2.5 ounces of that stuff in some of these 3.5-inch shells, and if you're trying to cram all that through a really small hole really fast, it's not going to work.
So generally speaking, again, each case is special and unique to itself. Generally speaking, if you're going to go larger size and you're worried about the over-constriction, then just loosen up the choke side.
Back off constriction. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we're recording this now. By the time this comes out, it's going to be the week of Thanksgiving. What do you have going on for Black Friday?
We will be having a Black Friday sale. I think we're going to do 25% this year across the board, and I think Stacy's office manager is trying to come up with a free gift for everybody that places an order. What that's going to be, I don't know, but hopefully she's not going to break the bank on me. But we'll see.
Yeah. All right, everybody, listen to this. Check out the link in the show notes. I'm assuming it's just going to go through the website, or is it going to go through somebody else?
Yep, through the website.
All right, so find the link to the website in the show notes, and be looking out for that Black Friday event. Scott, one thing I do when I start wrapping up all of these episodes is I like to throw it to the guests, and it can kind of go a million different ways, and ask, what's something I should have asked you that I didn't?
I think we pretty much covered everything, honestly, Nick. But a question I've been getting more and more, and it's becoming a thing, is where's TSS going in the upland world? Not necessarily TSS, but non-tox in general. And I think you're starting to see more and more of that. It's just because of environmental regulations and whatnot. More folks are forced to shoot non-tox.
We shot some today. It wasn't TSS. I'm not made of that much money, but
right.
But we shot some non-tox.
And yeah, I mean, steel works. I mean, it's been working for a long time. But as far as throwing, I just get more and more calls of folks shooting TSS in upland situations. For whatever reason, it's becoming a thing, and if you can afford to shoot it, it is the best patterning stuff out there. It just flat out works. It very forgiving, because typically it's small pellets. 8s or smaller, and you get a lot of them in a TSS load. So TSS is really coming on strong in the upland world.
So you're actually talking to more and more people that are using that for patterning as well as hunting, or are they patterning it with one load and then going out with because TSS is expensive. Anybody hasn't really looked at it.
But the folks that are going to shoot TSS, they're gonna do their homework. They're not going to go out there and just hope they've got a good load. If
they know.
Yep.
Yeah, if they're dropping that much money on a box of ammo, they're going to know that it's worth it.
Yep. Yep. So the biggest thing, regardless of what your game is, what kind of loads you're using, you got to know, pattern your shotguns, and something that goes along with that is if you got a fixed choke barrel or not. If you go to the patterning board and you haven't cleaned it in 2 years, you may want to clean it before you go shoot. I've seen some really
gnarly,
dirty chokes come in the shop that customers have sent me to try to match up with something else. I'm like, golly, maybe you don't need another choke. Maybe you need to clean the one you got. It's always good to. Everything works better when it's clean.
Oh yeah. So let's say somebody inherited their grandpa's old shotgun and the choke is just rusted into the end. I mean, are there certain tricks and solutions they can try at home, or is it just take it to a gunsmith and let them get it out the right way?
There, you can certainly try it at home. A good quality penetrating oil and put it in a glass jar or something, and then take your barrel off your gun and turn it upside down.
Just
put it in there, and let it soak for several days. Not overnight, but just forget about it for a while.
Oh, okay.
A lot of times that'll get it done. Vice grips are never recommended. Generally, that doesn't work very well. If it's stuck in there that bad, probably at that point.
See, that would be me. I would be the guy with channel locks trying to get it out.
On extended chokes, go for it. If you don't like that choke tube, because you're probably going to ruin it. But flush chokes, you don't have that option. But yeah, if it's stuck and a week or so of penetrating oil won't get it out, and probably if you care about the shotgun, you want to let's fix this. Take it to a gunsmith that's qualified to work on it.
Scott, I feel like I could pick your brains like all day, but ultimately I think it's going to come down to a lot of what if. Well, it depends, different scenarios like that. Like I truly am, my mind is racing with kind of the different options. So I appreciate you taking the time because it really opened up my eyes to some of the simple things that I can go do on a Saturday that would probably be very productive with my time leading up to next season. It just, we go out there, to your point, the people that shoot TSS at Upland, it's like they're willing to spend the money because they want to make it count. Same thing with us, to where just one afternoon in the backyard patterning your shotgun, it might open up a whole bunch of different scenarios and ideas to better improve your efficiency in the field next fall. And at the end of the day, that's what we're after, is making our time of field count.
Yeah, you want to be more successful. You know, you don't want to go there and miss every bird or cripple every bird.
Right.
You want to pull the trigger. You want to bring something home.
Yeah. Well, and we talked about some of my issues with, as far as crippling on some of these trips. We witnessed on some of the chokes and what was going on. I'm like, well, that makes sense with what I've been seeing, and so I'm going to adjust at least the ammo with some of these chokes to where, not from just an efficiency standpoint, but also recovery of game. And just ethical standpoint is, if you can spend an afternoon, a few hours patterning your shotgun, and you come away with something that you can count on a little bit more reliably, I would say that, we all owe it to the resource to do that from time to time. And again, maybe that's a page that we can take from the turkey hunters, because they seem to do that every single year, whereas a upland hunter is just like, get the shotgun out of the safe and knock off the dust and let's roll.
Yeah. I don't know what the reason behind that is, but much more common with wing shooters than turkey hunters, for sure. I guess if you can fill the sky with lead, then you're bound to bring down something, right?
That's something eventually. Scott, I appreciate it. We're going to pack up and get out of here before it starts raining again, but I appreciate you taking the time. It was a lot of fun.
My pleasure.
All right.